Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The eye of the camera. Have you ever wondered how a single object could change your life forever? For me, it all began with an unassuming trip to a quaint little thrift shop at the edge of town. I had no intention of buying anything. I was merely wandering, searching for a distraction from the monotonous routine of my everyday life. That was when I saw it, a vintage camera, its leather casing worn and faded, glinting under the soft shop lights like a forgotten treasure. As I picked it up, I felt an inexplicable shiver run down my spine. It was as if the camera held a pulse of its own, thrumming gently in my hands. I examined it closely. The lens was clean, and the shutter seemed to click perfectly. The shopkeeper, a frail old man with deep-set eyes, noticed my interest. "Ah, that one's special," he said, a hint of warning in his voice. "It's seen things." I laughed nervously, dismissing his words as mere exaggeration. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this camera than met the eye. I handed over a few bills and left the shop, cradling my new acquisition like a delicate artifact. That night, I decided to test it out. I set up a few objects in my dimly lit living room, a flickering candle, my favorite book, and a small potted plant. I pressed the shutter and felt a rush of excitement as the camera whirred to life. The moment was captured, or so I thought. When I developed the film the next day, I was taken aback. The images revealed not just my arranged objects, but something else entirely. In the background of the first photograph, just beyond the flicker of the candlelight, stood a shadowy figure. I squinted at the image, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was that? The shopkeeper's words echoed in my mind, "It's seen things." A chill settled over me. I brushed it off as a trick of the light, a product of my imagination. But as I continued to develop the film, the unease grew. Each photo contained the figure, always lingering at the edges, never fully in focus. I dismissed it as a glitch or an odd coincidence, but deep down, an unsettling dread began to fester. I decided to put the camera away for a while. But the following day, as I was sorting through my things, I felt an inexplicable pull toward it. The urge to capture something real, something genuine, was too strong to resist. Perhaps I could even uncover the mystery of the shadowy figure. So I took it with me on a walk through the neighborhood, hoping to find something inspiring. The air was crisp, the trees rustled gently in the wind, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. But as I wandered down familiar streets, I began to notice something odd. Each time I lifted the camera to my eye, I caught glimpses of the figure, now more defined than before, lurking behind unsuspecting passers-by. My heart raced. Who were these people? Why were they appearing in my viewfinder? Each snap seemed to capture not just their faces, but a strange sense of foreboding. I snapped a picture of an elderly woman feeding birds in the park, only to find that the shadow was right behind her, looming ominously. I felt an icy finger trace my spine. What was happening? As I turned to head home, the world around me began to shift. The laughter of children playing, the chirping of birds, everything faded into a distant hum. I hurried home, the camera clutched tightly in my hand, desperate to make sense of the madness unfolding around me. By the time I reached my door, my hands were trembling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something terrible was about to happen. It was just a camera, I kept telling myself. Just a camera. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. My breath quickened as I placed the camera on the table and sat down. I stared at it, willing it to tell me what was happening. That's when I noticed a flicker on the screen, a preview of the next photo I had taken. My heart dropped. In the frame was the same elderly woman, but this time, her eyes were wide with terror. In the background, the shadow loomed closer, and beneath her, the ground seemed to crack and twist. I leaned back in my chair, a cold sweat forming on my brow. I had to figure this out. I had to understand what this camera was trying to show me. But as the evening wore on, a thought crept into my mind. What if these images were more than just glimpses of the past? What if they were glimpses of the future? That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, the shadows dancing on the walls, whispering secrets I was not ready to hear. Just as I was about to drift off, a sound startled me awake, a faint clicking noise, like the sound of a camera shutter. I bolted upright, my heart pounding in my chest. The camera sat innocently on the table, its lens staring back at me. But I was no longer certain if it was innocent. I rubbed my eyes, attempting to shake off the remnants of sleep that clung to me like cobwebs. The clicking sound echoed in the quiet room, rhythmic and unnerving, like a heartbeat in the darkness. I glanced toward the camera, my chest tightening with a mixture of fear and fascination. How could it make such a noise? It was as if it were alive, beckoning me to uncover its secrets. I edged closer, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, and reached for the camera. As I lifted it, an inexplicable wave of dread washed over me. I turned it over in my hands, inspecting every inch, searching for any signs of malfunction or hidden devices. But there was nothing, just the camera, the same antique piece that had intrigued me from the moment I laid eyes on it. I decided to check the remaining film, hoping to catch a glimpse of what else it might reveal. The cool, metallic film canister slipped between my fingers as I fumbled with the latch. My heart raced as I pulled out the spool. I had developed 3 rolls so far, each one containing those ominous images, yet something nagged at me. What if the film contained even more? What if it was trying to show me something vital? With a shaky hand, I set the camera down and hurried to the darkroom I had set up in my basement. The air was damp and musty, the faint smell of chemicals lingering as I shuffled through my supplies. I turned on the dim red light, and as it bathed the room in an eerie glow, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Once the room was prepared, I inserted the spool into the developing tank, my mind racing with questions. How did this camera hold such power? Was it merely a coincidence, or was there something supernatural at play? I filled the tank with developer, watching as the film slowly unfurled in the dark, revealing its secrets. As I stirred the developing solution, my thoughts drifted back to the images I had seen. Each one was a haunting reminder of something looming just beyond the veil of the present. My pulse quickened as I recalled the elderly woman's expression, the sheer terror etched into her features. What was about to happen to her? Minutes felt like hours as I waited, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension in the room. Finally, I removed the film from the tank and rinsed it under running water. My breath hitched in my throat as I watched the images materialize, revealing yet another glimpse into a reality I didn't want to accept. One by one, the photographs emerged, each more disturbing than the last. There was the elderly woman again, her eyes wide with fear, but now I could see the shadowy figure clearer. It appeared almost human, though its features were obscured, a dark mass that seemed to swallow the light around it. In another photo, a young couple laughed together, blissfully unaware of the dark presence looming behind them. I could almost hear their joy, yet the image felt tainted, like a cruel joke played by fate. I pinned the photographs on the wall, each one forming a tapestry of dread. The more I examined them, the clearer the pattern became. Each image was a countdown, and I could feel the clock ticking, urging me to understand the connection before it was too late. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, cutting through the silence like a knife. I jumped, nearly knocking over the developing tray. It was a message from Sarah, my best friend. "Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight?" she wrote. I stared at the screen, the weight of the camera in my hand growing heavier. Should I tell her about the camera? About the images? A sense of protectiveness washed over me. I couldn't burden her with this darkness. Not yet. I quickly replied, "Yes. Just finishing up some things. See you at 7? After hitting send, I returned my focus to the photographs. They were more than just images, they were warnings. Each person, each scene, what if I could prevent the impending tragedies? With a sudden rush of determination, I made a plan. I would carry the camera everywhere, snapping pictures of people I encountered. I needed to know if the shadowy figure was attached to them, if they were fated to meet some grim fate. By the time I finished cleaning the darkroom, a creeping sense of dread settled in my gut. What if my actions had consequences? What if I was not just a passive observer but an active participant in these events? As I prepared to meet Sarah, I made sure to grab the camera, its weight a constant reminder of the responsibility now resting on my shoulders. With a last glance at the wall of photographs, I slipped the camera into my bag and stepped into the evening air, the sun beginning to set, casting long shadows across the street. Dinner with Sarah was filled with laughter and light, a welcome distraction from the chaos swirling in my mind. She talked about her day, her plans for the weekend, and I smiled, nodding along, though my thoughts were elsewhere. I kept the camera hidden under the table, my fingers brushing against its cool leather as I mentally replayed the images, trying to anticipate the next tragic encounter. After dinner, we walked through the park, where the air was thick with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. I felt a moment of peace, but it was short-lived. As we strolled, I caught sight of an elderly man sitting alone on a bench. The same sense of dread washed over me as I raised the camera, instinctively clicking the shutter. The flash went off, illuminating the darkening park, and in that instant, I caught a glimpse of the shadow right behind him. My breath caught in my throat as I lowered the camera, a feeling of nausea pooling in my stomach. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, glancing at me with concern. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. I couldn't shake the feeling of the shadow pressing in around us, as if the camera was not just capturing moments but somehow altering them, intertwining our fates with those of the people I was photographing. As we continued our walk, I couldn't help but feel that time was running out. Each snap of the shutter was a countdown, ticking away toward an unknown disaster that I seemed helpless to stop. What would happen if I couldn't intervene in time? By the time I returned home that night, my mind was racing. I had a new resolve. I would study each photograph more carefully, look for patterns, clues that might reveal the timing of these looming deaths. I needed to understand how to wield this dark gift, or curse, before it consumed me completely. In the dim light of my apartment, I spread the photos across the table, each one a window into a potential tragedy. The shadow loomed behind every captured moment, a dark reminder that I was not just an observer but a reluctant participant in a macabre game. As I prepared to sift through the photos again, a sudden chill swept through the room, the air growing thick with an unnatural heaviness. I paused, glancing over my shoulder. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something move, an indistinct shape lurking just out of sight. I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping fear. It was just my imagination, right? But deep down, I knew I was not alone. The camera had awakened something, and it would not rest until it revealed its secrets. The following morning arrived with an unsettling calm, the kind that hung heavy in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. I awoke with a sense of urgency, the images from the night before swirling in my mind like leaves caught in a whirlwind. I couldn't escape the feeling that time was slipping through my fingers, each moment ticking away towards something I couldn't quite grasp. I brewed a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen as I tried to shake off the remnants of dread that clung to me. I could still see the photographs spread across the table in my mind, the faces, the shadow, the growing sense of impending doom. I forced myself to focus, to plan my next steps. Today, I would visit the elderly man from the park, the one whose photo haunted me. Maybe he held a clue. I had to know what I was up against. I gathered the courage to face whatever fate had in store and decided to take the camera with me, its weight a constant reminder of my mission. As I stepped outside, the sun shone brightly, casting playful shadows that danced across the pavement. The contrast between the cheerful day and the darkness that enveloped my thoughts felt jarring. I made my way to the park, the camera slung over my shoulder, and my heart raced with each step. When I arrived, I found the elderly man sitting on the same bench, feeding the birds, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within me. I approached slowly, my pulse quickening as I debated how to start the conversation. What could I possibly say? "Excuse me, sir, but I have this camera that shows death. Care to chat?" Instead, I opted for a simple greeting. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile as I took a seat beside him. He looked up, his eyes sparkling like blue glass marbles. "Ah, a lovely morning indeed. Care to join me in feeding the birds?" "Sure," I replied, taking a handful of breadcrumbs from his bag and scattering them on the ground. The birds flitted about, pecking eagerly at the scattered morsels. "Name's Harold," he introduced himself, turning his gaze back to the birds. "Nice to meet you, Harold. I'm Alex." We exchanged pleasantries, and as I chatted with him, I tried to assess the man, his demeanor, his presence, anything that might hint at what the camera had captured. Harold shared stories of his youth, of the adventures he had in his long life, and for a moment, I felt my worries fade. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, a nagging thought crept into my mind. What if I was simply prolonging the inevitable? I couldn't shake the images of him, the looming shadow, the terrified eyes. "Harold," I ventured cautiously, "do you ever feel like something is watching you? Like there's something you can't quite see?" He paused, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "I suppose we all feel that way sometimes, don't we? Life has a way of surprising us." "Surprising?" I echoed, my heart pounding. "In what way?" He chuckled softly, a warm sound that filled the space between us. "Oh, life is full of unexpected twists and turns. I've seen it all. Just last week, I had a strange encounter at the grocery store, ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years, only to find out he passed away a month prior. My stomach dropped. The feeling of dread surged within me, tightening its grip. I fought to keep my voice steady. "That's unsettling, isn't it?" Harold's gaze grew distant, as if he was lost in memories. Sometimes I think we're all just shadows passing by in the grand scheme of things. But that's what makes life beautiful, don't you think? The fragility of it all. A lump formed in my throat as I nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, I guess so. I wanted to press further, to ask him if he felt any sense of danger or if he had ever seen something he couldn't explain. But just then, a sudden commotion caught our attention. A group of children ran past, their laughter ringing out like chimes. For a moment, the atmosphere lightened, and I watched them play, wishing I could share in their innocence. Then, without warning, a shrill scream pierced the air, shattering the moment. My heart raced as I turned to see a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing frozen in terror. She pointed toward the playground where our friends had been playing moments before. A boy lay sprawled on the ground, clutching his leg, and the shadow loomed nearby, flickering in and out of sight, just as it had in the photographs. "Stay here," I urged Harold, my instincts kicking in. I rushed toward the scene, the camera swinging wildly at my side. As I neared the boy, I felt the air grow heavy, an unseen weight pressing down on me, a premonition of the impending tragedy. "Are you okay?" I knelt beside him, trying to keep my voice calm despite the chaos unfolding. He groaned, tears streaming down his face. "I fell. I think I broke my leg." As the other children gathered around, panic set in, their cries melding into a cacophony of confusion. I glanced around, my heart pounding in my ears. Where was the shadow? Before I could process this situation, I caught a glimpse of something dark shifting in the corner of my eye. I raised the camera instinctively, snapping a photo just as the shadow slipped away from view. I felt a chill wash over me, an overwhelming sense of despair. "Someone call an ambulance," I shouted, trying to get control of the situation. My mind raced. Could I prevent this? As adults began to rush to the scene, I stepped back, the camera still in my hands, shaking. I stared at the image that had just developed in the viewfinder, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the frame, the shadow loomed larger than ever, its dark tendrils reaching toward the boy. My heart sank. I had witnessed the incident, but it felt like I was merely a spectator, trapped in a horrific tableau. I looked up, searching for Harold, hoping he might have some insight or words of wisdom. But he was nowhere to be found. "Alex," a voice called out, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sarah, rushing toward me, worry etched on her face. "What's going on?" "I got your text about the emergency." "Just a boy who fell," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm not sure what happened, he just collapsed." She nodded, her eyes scanning the scene. "Where's Harold?" "I don't know," I admitted, my stomach twisting. "He was just here." As we moved to the edge of the commotion, I scanned the area, anxiety creeping in. My heart raced, realizing how easy it was for things to spiral out of control. The ambulance sirens echoed in the distance, drawing nearer. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little overwhelmed." But the truth was, I felt anything but fine. I was unraveling, each new image, each new encounter adding to the burden I carried. The shadow had followed me here, and I was terrified of what it would do next. When the paramedics arrived, they took charge, ushering the children aside and examining the injured boy. I stepped back, allowing the professionals to handle the situation, but my thoughts were racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something much darker than I ever imagined. The images, the shadow, Everything felt like a cruel game, and I was caught in the middle. After the chaos settled and the boy was safely in the ambulance, I turned to Sarah, my heart heavy with the weight of the morning's events. "I think something is really wrong," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I've been seeing things. Shadows, warnings." "What do you mean?" she asked, her eyes widening with concern. "It's this camera," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's showing me what's going to happen to people." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign of sanity. "Alex, maybe you just need a break from it. It's an old camera. It could be messing with your mind." "No," I insisted, shaking my head. "I've seen things that..." Suddenly, a shriek echoed from the playground, and my heart dropped. I turned to see a crowd gathering again. In the chaos, I had completely missed what was happening. "Let's go check it out," Sarah urged, pulling me forward. As we rushed back toward the playground, I felt the shadow hovering near, lurking just beyond the corner of my eye. My breath quickened, and a sense of dread filled my chest. I needed to know what was happening, but a part of me feared what I would find. When we reached the crowd, I pushed through to the front, only to be met with a sight that made my stomach drop. A woman knelt beside a fallen child, tears streaming down her cheeks as she cradled the boy in her arms. It was the same child from earlier, the one I had tried to help. "What's happening?" I gasped, feeling Sarah's grip tighten on my arm. The paramedics were working frantically, their faces grim as they assessed the situation. "He's not breathing," one of them shouted, and the world around me began to blur. I stumbled back, the camera slipping from my grip and crashing onto the ground. I felt like I was falling, the reality of what I was witnessing crashing down around me. The shadows were no longer just behind the lens, they were here, in the world, and I had brought them with me. I stood frozen, a witness to horror unfolding in front of me. The scene felt surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. The child's mother sobbed uncontrollably, cradling her son as paramedics struggled to revive him. I could see the panic etched on their faces, the urgency in their movements, and yet everything felt distant, as if I were watching through a fogged window. "What happened?" I heard Sarah's voice, laced with fear as she pushed through the crowd to my side. I shook my head, my mind racing. "I don't know. He was fine a moment ago, and now..." I couldn't finish my sentence. My throat felt tight, choking back a mixture of dread and disbelief. The child lay still, his small body limp and lifeless. The paramedics worked with frantic determination, their shouts cutting through the murmurs of the onlookers. "Give me the defibrillator," one called, and I watched, heart pounding, as they prepared to revive him. With every moment that passed, my mind screamed in protest. This isn't happening. This can't be real. But the air crackled with tension, the kind that hangs in the aftermath of tragedy, and deep down, I knew the truth. Suddenly, the camera on the ground caught my eye. Its lens glinted in the sunlight, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. It had shown me this, had shown me moments of impending doom. I stumbled forward, reaching for it. "Alex, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern. "I need to take a picture," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I lifted the camera to my eye. I felt a compulsion, an overwhelming urge to capture this moment. It was as if the camera was calling to me, demanding to document the tragedy, to frame the chaos. "Are you serious?" Sarah's disbelief was palpable. "This isn't the time." Ignoring her, I pressed the shutter. The shutter clicked, and for a fleeting moment, the chaos around me faded. I was enveloped in darkness, and then there was light, a bright flash that illuminated the scene before me. In that instant, I saw it clearly. The shadow loomed above the boy, darker than anything I'd ever encountered. It seemed to pulsate with malevolence, a dark energy that wrapped around him like a cloak. My heart raced as I pulled away from the camera, gasping at what I had seen. "Did you get it?" Sarah asked, urgency in her voice, but I was lost in the image. "No," I stammered, my voice trembling. "I saw something." "What do you mean?" "It was there." I pointed toward the boy, but the shadow had vanished, leaving behind only the frantic efforts of the paramedics. "Alex, focus," Sarah said, shaking me slightly. "What did you see?" I blinked rapidly, trying to regain my composure. It was a shadow. It was over him, just before. I couldn't finish the thought. "Just before what?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Just before he fell," I whispered. "It's like it was waiting for him. I can't explain it." The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they drew closer. I felt like I was on the edge of a precipice, teetering between reality and some dark, twisted fate. As the ambulance arrived, the paramedics hurriedly moved the child onto a stretcher, their faces strained with determination. A crowd had gathered, murmuring in hushed tones, a collective breath held in fear and disbelief. "I can't just stand here," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "I have to do something." "Do what, Alex?" Sarah replied, panic creeping into her tone. "There's nothing we can do." "I have to figure this out," I insisted, my gaze darting between the paramedics and the crowd. "I have to find out what this shadow is and why it's following me." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" she asked, concern etched across her features. "I can't keep running from this." I shot back, anger flaring within me. "I need answers." With a deep breath, I turned away from the chaos and scanned the park, searching for a sign or a clue. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the grass, but something felt off. The world felt unsteady, as if the very ground beneath me was shifting. I walked away from the scene, my heart heavy with the weight of despair and dread. I needed to find Harold. He had spoken of shadows, of the fragility of life, and I sensed that he held the key to understanding what was happening. "Alex, wait!" Sarah called, following closely behind me. "Where are you going?" "I have to find Harold," I said, determination driving me forward. "He might know something." "Don't you think you're overreacting? We just witnessed a tragedy." "I know," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "But that's exactly why I need to talk to him. I can't ignore this any longer." As we walked through the park, I felt the weight of every step. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, mocking me as I pressed on. I recalled Harold's earlier words, how life was unpredictable and often cruel. Finally, we arrived at the bench where I had last seen him. My heart sank as I realized it was empty. I glanced around, scanning the park for any sign of the elderly man, but he was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he left," Sarah suggested, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "No, he wouldn't just leave. He was right here." I felt a growing sense of urgency, my pulse racing as I searched the area. "Let's just sit for a moment," she said, her voice soothing. "Take a breath. Maybe he'll come back." I reluctantly agreed, sinking onto the bench. As I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the shadow was lurking just beyond my view, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Do you think it's connected to the camera?" Sarah asked, breaking the tense silence. "I don't know," I admitted, rubbing my temples in frustration. "But I can't ignore the signs. It's like a thread leading me somewhere." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows that danced around us. I felt a chill, and a cold breeze swept through the park, rustling the leaves overhead. "Maybe we should go back," Sarah suggested gently. "This place feels off." Just as I opened my mouth to respond, a rustling caught my attention. I turned toward the sound and felt a surge of hope. There, in the distance, I spotted Harold slowly making his way toward us, his cane tapping against the pavement. "Harold," I called, rising to my feet. He looked up, a faint smile spreading across his withered face. "Ah, Alex. Good to see you again." I rushed over to him, urgency flooding my voice. "You need to help me. I saw something. A shadow. It's been following me. I think it's linked to the boy." But before I could finish, Harold raised a hand to stop me. "Hold on now, let's take a breath. I can sense your distress. Please, I need answers," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "What do you know about these shadows? Why are they haunting me?" He studied me for a moment, his blue eyes piercing into my soul. "The shadows are a manifestation of our fears, Alex. They feed our anxiety and despair." "Feeding on it?" I echoed, confusion and fear mingling in my mind. "Yes," he continued, his voice steady. "They thrive in the darkness, lurking in the corners of our minds, waiting for the right moment to strike. But they are not invincible." "Then how do I stop them?" I asked, clinging to hope. "By facing them," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You must confront your fears, acknowledge their presence. Only then can you regain control." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination building within me. "But what about the camera? Why does it show me these moments?" "Ah, the camera," he mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "It's a tool, a double-edged sword. It reveals truth, but it also amplifies your fears. You must learn to wield it wisely." As he spoke, I felt a flicker of understanding. The camera was not the enemy, it was a reflection of my own psyche, magnifying my darkest thoughts and fears. "I can do this," I murmured to myself, resolve solidifying within me. "I will face this darkness." Just then, Sarah joined us, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay," I replied, newfound confidence shining in my voice. "I think I finally understand what I need to do." "Good," she said, visibly relieved. "But let's not linger too long here. The park feels unsettling." Harold nodded in agreement. "You should take care, Alex. Shadows can be deceptive." As we prepared to leave, I felt a strange energy in the air, a tingling sensation that coursed through me. I glanced back, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a dark figure at the edge of the park, watching us intently. With a shiver, I turned away and followed Sarah and Harold out of the park, my heart pounding in my chest. The cool evening air was heavy with a tension that clung to me like a thick fog. As we made our way down the familiar streets, the once comforting surroundings now felt ominous and unfamiliar. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers reaching out to grab me. I could sense the darkness looming closer, whispering doubts and fears into my mind. I can't shake the feeling that it's not over, I said, breaking the silence that enveloped us. Sarah walked beside me, her expression a mix of concern and determination. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady. I don't know, I admitted, glancing back over my shoulder as if expecting to see the shadow trailing behind. It feels like it's waiting for me to let my guard down. We can't let it control us, Sarah said firmly. You're stronger than it thinks. Her words ignited a flicker of hope within me, but doubt quickly clouded my mind. What if I couldn't face it? What if I failed? Harold mentioned facing your fears, I said, trying to draw strength from her encouragement. But how? I don't even know what I'm truly afraid of. You've already faced so much, Sarah replied. You've witnessed death, and now you're trying to make sense of it all. That takes courage. I nodded, but my heart felt heavy with uncertainty. The events of the day played in my mind like a broken record, the boy's lifeless body, the shadow lurking just out of sight. It felt like a storm brewing on the horizon, ready to unleash its fury. Let's head back to my place, I suggested, hoping to find some clarity in familiar surroundings. I can go through the photos from the camera. Maybe there's something I missed. Good idea, Sarah agreed. We can make sense of it together. As we approached my apartment building, the familiar sight of it offered a moment of solace. But as I opened the door and stepped inside, I felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, suffocating me in a silence that echoed with dread. I'll grab us some drinks, Sarah said, heading toward the kitchen. I wandered into the living room, my gaze falling on the camera resting on the coffee table. Its presence felt almost sinister now, a reminder of the darkness I had been thrust into. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, and felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. Alex, are you okay? Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice pulling me back to reality. Yeah, just thinking, I replied, forcing a smile as I turned to face her. She returned with 2 glasses of water, handing one to me. Drink up. You need to stay hydrated, especially with everything that's happened. Thanks, I said, taking a sip and feeling the cool liquid slide down my throat. It felt refreshing, grounding me in the moment. Do you want to start going through the photos now? Sarah asked, glancing at the camera. I hesitated, staring at the device that had become both a burden and a source of truth. Yes, let's do it. Setting the glass down, I opened the camera's menu, my fingers trembling slightly as I navigated through the images. Each photo felt like a window into a world I was afraid to enter. Finally, I came across the first image I had captured after the boy fell. I took a deep breath and pressed the button to view it. The screen flickered to life, revealing the scene from the park, paramedics working frantically, the child's mother crying, the crowd frozen in horror. But there was something else lurking in the background, a dark shape that seemed to blend into the shadows of the trees. Alex, what are you seeing? Sarah asked, leaning closer to get a better look. There, I exclaimed, pointing at the screen. Do you see it? She squinted, tilting her head. I can barely make it out. It looks like it's that shadow. I interrupted, heart racing. It's right there, just behind the trees. Sarah's expression shifted to one of alarm. You really think that's the same one? I have to believe it is. It's too similar to ignore. As I scrolled through more photos, each one revealed the same dark figure, always lurking just out of sight, a harbinger of doom. Why is it following me? I murmured, the weight of despair pressing down on me. I don't know, but we need to figure it out, Sarah said firmly, determination shining in her eyes. There must be a reason. Maybe it's connected to the boy. Did you capture anything else that could give us a clue? I hesitated, memories flooding back. The camera showed the moment before tragedy, but did it also capture a message? I kept scrolling, and suddenly, one image caught my breath. It was a photograph I had taken earlier in the day, before the park incident. A fleeting image of a woman sitting alone on a bench, her face hidden in the shadows, her posture hunched. Look at this one, I said, heart pounding as I held it up for Sarah to see. Who is that? She asked, squinting at the screen. I don't remember seeing anyone like that. I didn't see her either. But it feels important. The woman's face was obscured, but I could sense an air of sadness emanating from her. The kind of sorrow that left a mark, one that shadows could thrive upon. Do you think she's connected to the shadow? Sarah wondered aloud. Maybe, I replied, feeling a chill wash over me. But how? I don't know, but we should find out, she said, her voice steady. Maybe she can help us understand what's happening. Where do we even start? I asked, overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. Let's think logically, Sarah suggested. If this woman was in the park, maybe she lives nearby. We could try asking around. I nodded, a flicker of determination igniting within me. You're right. We have to try. We gathered our things and left my apartment, the weight of the camera heavy in my hands. Each step felt like a march into the unknown, but I refused to let fear dictate my actions. As we walked through the dimly lit streets, the shadows seemed to stretch and curl around us, alive with anticipation. I felt the darkness lurking at the edges of my vision, taunting me with its presence. We're going to figure this out, Sarah said, her voice a lifeline amidst the growing unease. Yeah, I replied, forcing a smile despite the dread gnawing in my stomach. We will. Finally, we arrived at the park, the site of the earlier tragedy. The air felt heavy with memory, each rustle of the leaves echoing the whispers of the past. Let's start by retracing our steps, I suggested, glancing around the park. Maybe we'll find something that leads us to her. We moved cautiously, our eyes scanning the surroundings. The benches were empty, the grass untrampled, and the shadows grew long as the sun continued to dip below the horizon. Do you see anything? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not yet, I replied, but deep down, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing in around us. As we walked deeper into the park, a strange sensation enveloped me, a feeling that we were not alone. Sarah, I said, my voice shaking. Do you feel that? Feel what? She asked, glancing around. It's like someone is watching us. She paused, her eyes widening in realization. You think it's the shadow? I don't know, I said, my heart racing. But we need to find out. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the tense silence, and I turned to see a figure emerging from the trees. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized her, the woman from the photograph. Who are you? I called out, my voice trembling. She hesitated, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sorrow. I didn't mean to intrude, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you the one from the photo? I asked, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Yes, she replied, her gaze shifting nervously. I didn't know anyone was watching. Why were you sitting there? I pressed, feeling a strange sense of urgency. She looked away, pain flickering across her features. I was lost in thought. I come here often, but today felt different. The shadows seemed heavier. Do you know about the shadow? I asked, my heart racing. She nodded slowly, her expression grave. It's been following me for years. It feeds on my sadness, my regrets. I thought it was gone, but it keeps returning. Why? I asked, feeling a knot of fear tightening in my chest. It seeks those who carry pain, she said, her voice trembling. And it won't stop until it is what it wants. Which is what? Sarah interjected, her voice steady. The woman's eyes met mine, a mixture of fear and understanding. It wants to take you too, to feed off your darkness. My heart sank as her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had tried to fight it, but it was a losing battle. What do we do? I asked, feeling hopeless. Face it, she replied. You have to confront it. Only then can you break free. I felt a wave of desperation wash over me, but deep inside, I knew she was right. I had to face my fears, no matter how terrifying they may be. Will you help us? Sarah asked, her voice steady. The woman hesitated, her eyes clouded with doubt. I can guide you, but the fight is yours alone. As she spoke, I felt the shadows closing in, wrapping around me like a vice. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. I'll do it, I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. I won't let it take me. The woman nodded, her expression filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. Then let's begin. With the woman's words echoing in my mind, we formed a small circle in the dimming light of the park, the shadows lengthening around us as if they were conspiring with the darkness that sought me. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle. Tell us what we need to do, I urged, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination welling up inside me. The woman studied me, her gaze piercing yet sad. You must confront the shadow directly. It thrives on your fears, your insecurities. You need to face what it shows you. Only then can you sever its hold over you. What if it's too much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It will be, she replied solemnly. But you must remember that it can't harm you unless you let it. You are stronger than it wants you to believe. A chill ran through me at her words. The shadow had already taken so much from me. How could I be stronger? But deep down, beneath layers of fear, a flicker of defiance began to spark. Where do we start? Sarah asked, her voice steady, grounding me in the face of the rising tide of anxiety. Follow me, the woman said, turning towards a dense thicket at the edge of the park. I exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, but we moved together, stepping into the shadows as we followed her deeper into the trees. The atmosphere changed as we entered the thicket. The air felt heavier, thicker, almost alive with a palpable energy. The light from the setting sun barely penetrated the canopy above, casting eerie shapes that danced around us. Stay close, the woman instructed, her voice low and urgent. The shadow can manifest at any moment. I nodded, swallowing hard as we pressed on. The rustling leaves seemed to whisper warnings, reminding me of the dangers that lurked just out of sight. My heart raced as we emerged into a small clearing, dimly lit by the fading light. In the center of the clearing stood a large, gnarled tree, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. It was here that the air felt charged, as if the very ground was aware of the confrontation that was about to unfold. "This is where you will face it," the woman said, her expression grave. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "What do I need to do?" "Stand beneath the tree and focus on your fears," she instructed. "Allow the shadow to reveal itself. When it comes, don't shy away. Confront it, speak your truth, and reclaim your power." My hand shook as I stepped forward, the ground feeling uneven beneath my feet. I stood beneath the gnarled branches, feeling their weight pressing down on me. "I'm ready," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The woman and Sarah stepped back, their eyes filled with concern but also support. "We're right here," Sarah whispered, her voice a calming presence amidst the rising dread. As I stood alone beneath the tree, the world around me fell silent. The air grew colder, and an unsettling stillness enveloped the clearing. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and my breath quickened as the darkness coalesced before me. It began as a swirling mass, a shadowy figure forming in the fading light. I could feel its energy, a heavy weight that pressed against my chest, tightening like a vice. It took shape slowly, an amorphous entity that flickered in and out of existence, whispering my deepest fears in a chorus of haunting voices. "Alex," it hissed, the sound like 1,000 murmurs entwined. "You cannot escape me. I am your regret, your pain, your fear. You will never be free." "No!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. "You don't own me. I won't let you control my life anymore." The shadow recoiled slightly, but it quickly reformed, more menacing than before. "You think you can face me? You are weak, filled with doubt and sorrow. You can't hide from your truth." As it spoke, flashes of memories flooded my mind, the boy in the park, the sorrowful faces of those I had lost, the darkness I had tried to bury. Each image felt like a stab to my heart, but I refused to cower. "I may have lost people," I said, my voice steadying with resolve, "but I won't allow you to make me feel guilty for it. I won't carry their pain anymore." With each declaration, I felt a surge of strength wash over me, pushing against the suffocating darkness. The shadow hesitated, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain its shape. "Do you think it's that easy?" it snarled, its voice growing more desperate. "You cannot just erase the past." "No, but I can learn from it," I replied fiercely. "I can honor their memories without letting you dictate my life. You have no power over me." With that final declaration, I envisioned the light, the warmth of love, the memories of laughter, and the moments of joy that still flickered in my heart. I gathered that light, allowing it to fill me, pushing the shadow back with its brightness. The shadow writhed, its form darkening in protest. "You will regret this," it shrieked, but the light around me grew stronger, a protective barrier pushing against its malevolence. "Never again," I shouted, channeling every ounce of strength I had left. "I am done living in fear." With one final surge, the light exploded around me, illuminating the clearing in a brilliant glow. The shadow screamed, a piercing wail that echoed through the trees, and in that moment it shattered, dissipating into the night like mist in the wind. I stood there, panting, my heart racing, the remnants of the shadow fading into nothingness. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. "Alex." Sarah's voice broke through the stillness as she rushed forward, her face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" I think so," I replied, feeling both drained and exhilarated. The woman approached slowly, her expression one of awe and admiration. You did it. You faced it. Is it really gone? I asked, uncertainty creeping back into my mind. For now, she said gently. But it will always be a part of you. Remember that it feeds on your pain. You must continue to confront your fears, to heal. I nodded, the weight of her words settling deep within me. I will. As we made our way back through the park, the moon rose high above, casting a silvery light that washed over the world. The shadows no longer felt threatening. Instead, they were just a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. I can't believe we did it, Sarah said, her voice filled with disbelief. We did, I replied, a smile creeping onto my face. I feel free. Let's not forget what we learned today, she said, her eyes shining with determination. We have the power to face our fears and change our stories. As we reached the edge of the park, the woman turned to us, her expression softening. You are both stronger than you realize. Keep that strength close, and you will continue to overcome. Thank you, I said sincerely, feeling gratitude welling up inside me. With a nod, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving us standing at the edge of the park, the weight of the past lifting as the future opened up before us. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I had faced my shadow and emerged stronger. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As we stepped away from the park, the cool night air brushed against my skin, invigorating and refreshing. The moon hung high, its light illuminating the path ahead, but shadows still lingered at the corners of my mind, remnants of what I had faced. The reality of the battle weighed on me like a thick fog. Are you okay? Sarah asked, her voice gentle yet probing as she glanced sideways at me, concern etched on her face. I will be, I replied, though I could feel the shadow of uncertainty creeping back. I need time to process everything. She nodded in understanding, and we continued walking, the rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath our feet the only sound in the stillness of the night. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting an ethereal glow that felt both comforting and eerie. I can't believe what we just went through, Sarah said, breaking the silence again. It felt so real. It was real, I replied, the memories of the confrontation still fresh. But maybe that's the key. It's about acknowledging it, understanding it. Do you think it's really gone? She asked, her tone cautious. I think it's gone for now, I said, trying to sound confident. But I know it can return if I let my guard down. As we reached my apartment building, a sudden chill ran through me. I think I'll be okay now, I said, glancing at Sarah. But I need to be alone for a bit. Sure, she replied, her voice softening. Just don't hesitate to call if you need me. I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. I will. Thank you for being here, for helping me face this. With a nod, she turned to leave, her silhouette fading into the night. I watched her go, a sense of loneliness creeping back in. The warmth of companionship vanished, leaving me standing alone at the entrance of my building. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the familiar scent of old wood and faded paint enveloping me like a comforting blanket. My apartment felt strangely quiet, and I could almost hear the echoes of my own thoughts bouncing off the walls. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of solitude pressed down on me, amplifying the stillness around me. I walked toward the living room, where the camera sat on the coffee table, its lens glinting in the dim light. Suddenly, it felt like the room was closing in on me, the walls narrowing as if to trap me in a web of my own making. The camera, which had once been a tool of my fascination, now felt like a sinister relic, a reminder of the darkness I had just fought. I approached it hesitantly, drawn to it despite the unease curling in my stomach. I picked it up, the cool weight grounding me momentarily. As I examined it, a thought struck me. What if it could help me confront my fears further? I powered it on, the screen lighting up and displaying the last images captured. The photos flashed before my eyes, each one an echo of life and death intertwined. The faces of strangers stared back at me, their expressions frozen in time, each frame a moment of impending doom. Why did I let you take control? I whispered, my voice barely audible. You showed me horrors that didn't need to be seen. But then I remembered the woman's words, confrontation. Perhaps I could use this camera to uncover the shadows that lingered. As I scrolled through the photos, a particular image caught my attention, a woman standing in a crowded street, her face twisted in fear. I didn't recognize her, but the sense of urgency radiating from her image was undeniable. With a surge of determination, I grabbed my jacket and slipped on my shoes, preparing to step back into the night. I had no idea where this journey would lead me, but I felt an undeniable pull, a need to uncover more. The cool air hit me like a wave as I stepped outside, invigorating my senses. I walked down the empty street, the camera in hand, feeling the familiar thrill of the hunt. Each step resonated with purpose, a commitment to understanding the darkness that sought to envelop me. I recalled the area from the photo, the busy street, the tall buildings, the life bustling around. As I approached the spot, the familiar feelings of anxiety resurfaced, but I fought to keep them at bay. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative, to confront whatever shadows awaited me. When I arrived, the street was empty, bathed in the glow of distant streetlights. I stood in the spot where the woman had been captured, searching for any sign of her. The feeling of being watched prickled at the back of my neck, but I pushed it aside. "Show me," I said, almost as if to provoke the darkness. "If you want me, come out and face me." As if on cue, the air grew heavier, and I felt the temperature drop. Shadows began to coalesce around me, swirling in the air like a dark mist. My heart raced, but this time, I was ready. I raised the camera, aiming it at the swirling shadows. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, the words echoing off the buildings. The shadows twisted, forming into the outline of a figure, a dark silhouette that loomed before me. I could feel its anger, its desire to consume me. But this time, I felt a flicker of control, a sense of power coursing through me. "Your hold on me ends tonight," I declared, my voice steady. "You're nothing without my fear." The figure paused, its form flickering in and out, as if struggling against an unseen force. I took a deep breath, focusing on the warmth within me, on the light I had discovered in the clearing. With that thought, I pressed the shutter button, capturing the image of the shadow. As the flash burst, the darkness recoiled, a screeching wail escaping its form. "No!" it screamed, its voice echoing in agony. "You cannot escape." "I already have," I shouted back, feeling the light radiate from within. The shadow writhed, losing its shape, fraying at the edges. With each click of the camera, I felt myself reclaiming the moments it had taken from me, every ounce of fear, every shred of sorrow transformed into light. The air crackled with energy, and I felt the ground beneath me pulse with life. The shadow continued to writhe, but I stood my ground, pressing the shutter once more. With a final flash, the darkness shattered, dispersing like smoke in the wind. I stood there, heart racing, the adrenaline surging through me as the last remnants of the shadow dissolved into nothingness. Breathing heavily, I looked around, the street now bathed in moonlight. The weight that had clung to me for so long lifted, replaced by a profound sense of freedom. I had faced my fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged victorious. As I walked back home, the camera resting against my chest, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I had faced my past, and while it would always be a part of me, it no longer defined me. The shadows may always linger, but I now understood that I had the power to confront them, to embrace the light within. This was not the end of my journey, but rather a new beginning, one filled with the promise of healing and growth. I had faced the eye of the camera, and it had revealed the strength that lay dormant within me. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.